Blog Talk Radio.
This is the Monday, 16 September 2013 episode of the News in 10. Bostonred here from Bostonred on the World. It's our international news program. And we have a loaded news program. We'll hear in the last part, as we exit out of here, parts of an interview given by the head of the Syrian Arab Republic, President Dr. Bashar al-Assad. He gave this interview to the American editorial journalist Charlie Rose. It does bring to light a lot of things with the UN report today on the gassing in a suburb of Damascus, Syria. We'll look at that, but we have other items here as our time frame permits here. But much of the news is not covered, at least from the perspective here in the U.S. So thus we'll start with Japan and its nuclear reactor. Japan has started the process of switching off, and this is from Al Jazeera, its last working nuclear reactor for scheduled inspection with no restart dates in sight due to public hostility towards atomic power. The move Sunday leaves the world's third largest economy without atomic energy for the second time since the Hiroshima attack erupted in March of 2011. Shinzo Abe, he's the Prime Minister, openly supports the use of nuclear energy. He is a conservative, but the public has remained largely opposed to it for fears of possible accidents following the world's worst nuclear disaster at Chernobyl. That was in the Soviet Union at the time, in 1986. Remember it well. The Kansas electric power will be taken offline. The number 4 reactor of its Ozi nuclear plant in Fuji in western Japan. The work begins Sunday evening with the reactor expected to stop power generation after several hours before coming to a complete stop today, Monday. Japan had previously without any nuclear energy in May of 2012, when all the country's 50 commercial reactors stopped for scheduled checkups, with utilities unable to restart them due to public opposition. Fossil fuel use. The government voiced concern that Japan could experience major blackouts without nuclear power, particularly in the western region that relies heavily on nuclear power. Those fears, like many fears concerning so-called nuclear power, is unfounded, thanks in part to effective energy conservation programs, but the government gave approval to the Kaza Electric to restart number 3 and number 4 reactors at the Osi plant. Argon nuclear power was necessary to meet electrical demand during the winter. Japan's demand for electricity tends to peak in late summer, with a near comparable spike in early winter. The reactors were restarted in January of 2012. Japan has turned to pricey fossil fuel alternatives to fill the gap left by the shutdown of these plants. Radiation spread over homes. Well, we know the story of it. An estimated 8,000 gallons of contaminated water have been leaking into the Pacific Ocean every day. Now, this is a story there. This is from the Ministry of Energy, Trade, the Ministry of Economy, Trade, and Industry. That was on the 7th of August. 500,000 people were evacuated from areas around the Fujisawa in days following the start of the crisis. Tens of thousands are still not permitted to return. Some areas expected to be uninhabitable for decades. Now, you don't get the story as you should get it, and it's very unfortunate. The UN story from Reuters. This has involved the Syrian gas. We won't go much into it, but President Assad will talk about it. It just says that this is the most significant contamination, confirmed, use of chemical weapons against civilians since in Iraq under Saddam Hussein. That was in 1988. That's according to Ban Ki-moon. The international community has pledged to prevent such horrors from reoccurring, yet it's happened again. Well, there are many nations that have nuclear weapons, and they have not cleared their stockpiles, including the U.S. Their target is 2020, the Russian Republic 2014 or 2015. I need to get that going there. And the statement says, based on the evidence obtained during the investigation of Ghouta incident, the conclusion is that chemical weapons had been used in ongoing conflict between the parties in the Syrian Arab Republic, also against civilians, including children, relatively large scale. But now, in particular, the environmental, chemical, and medical samples we collected provide clear and convincing evidence that surface-to-surface rockets containing the nerve gas sarin were used. And Dr. Bassad El-Assad speaks to that. Sarin is a gas you can actually make in your backyard, in some open space, or in a warehouse, easy to be made. And it's also pointed out that the terrorists there have delivery systems to deliver these using rockets there to do it. Now, the French and some others would claim that only the government of Syria had the rockets and projectiles. That is not true. On to the report here, chemical weapons used in such a meteorological condition maximizes their potential impact. If the heavy gas can stay close to ground and penetrate in the lower levels of buildings and construction where people were seeking shelter. Now, the temperatures were falling between 2 a.m. and 5 in the morning. So this was done actually in the morning. Now, the number of people killed is one of the debatable points. The non-governmental agencies such as Doctors Without Borders, Médecins Sans Frontières, have said that basically the death toll is in the 300s. Now, there was also the Tokyo subway attacks in '95. The payload was 350 liters. It was 35 times that. But we've had kooks in the U.S. trying to make the sarin gas. And now remember also, there are units of the Syrian army and various naval warehouses that have been taken over, and there are people even from the Syrian armed forces that are now with the terrorists that have expertise in this. And you have many third parties within the Syrian territory. Billions of dollars of military ordnance is coming in through Turkey on a daily basis. The U.S. is running various things in there. Now, the M14 artillery rocket and the 330 millimeter caliber artillery rocket. Now, they have these. The terrorists do have these types of weapons. So, as to what they have and don't have, is very hard to say now. And you have to also understand that there are various paramilitary units in Syrian territory, sponsored by the French, the British, the Mossad, the U.S., CIA, paramilitary. So there are advisors there who know how to use these and weapons that are capable of doing it. So one cannot say who delivered these systems being delivered by the rockets as they were. Nonetheless, this will do it for us in terms of our time. One last item, there was a shooting at a military reservation in Washington, D.C. called the Naval Yard. 12 people so far have died in the shooting. One supposedly one of the gunman type. This is supposedly a restricted area. You needed some type of identification to get on it. It is an ongoing story, and we'll probably have more on Bostonred the next episode. President Obama gave a major speech today on the economy 5 years from the Depression in the U.S. We'll talk about it, and perhaps on our Numbers Man, which is our economic program, we'll have more on it. And as the week moves on, we hope to, on Bostonred, have something on politics and sports. Nonetheless, this is Bostonred for the news in 10 on the 16th day of September 2013. And hopefully the almost fall allergies do not get us. Good day.
As long as the United States doesn't obey the international law and trample over the Charter of the United Nations, we have to worry that any administration, not only this one, would do anything. But according to the lies that we've been hearing for the last 2 weeks from high-ranking officials in this administration, we have to expect the worst.
Are you prepared?
We've been living in difficult circumstances for the last 2 years and a half, and we prepare ourselves for every possibility. But that doesn't mean if you're prepared, things would be better. It's going to get worse with any foolish strike or stupid war.
What do you mean worse?
Worse because of the repercussions, because nobody can tell what the repercussion of the first strike, or you're talking about one region, bigger region. It's not only about Syria, it's interlinked region, it's intermingled, interlocked, whatever you want to call it. If you strike somewhere, you have to expect the repercussions somewhere else in different forms, in a way that you don't.
Are you suggesting that if in fact there's a strike, there would be repercussions against the United States from your friends in other countries like Iran or Hezbollah or others?
Yeah, as I said, it may take different forms, direct and indirect. Direct when people want to retaliate, or governments. Indirect when you're going to have instability and the spread of terrorism all over the region that will influence the West directly.
Have you had conversations with Russia, with Iran, with Hezbollah about how to retaliate?
We don't discuss this issue as a government, but we discuss the repercussions, which is more important because sometimes repercussions could be more destroying than the strike itself. Any American strike will not destroy as much as the terrorists has destroyed in Syria. So sometimes the repercussions could be many doubles the strike itself.
But some have suggested that it might tip the balance in the favor of the rebels and lead to the overthrow of your government.
Exactly. Any strike will be as direct support to Al-Qaeda offshoot that's called Al-Nusra, Jabhat al-Nusra, and the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. You're right about this. It's going to be direct support.
This is about chemical warfare. Let's talk about that. Do you approve of the use of chemical warfare?
What do you mean?
The use of chemicals, deadly chemicals?
Do I think that we have to use those?
No, do you think that it is an appropriate tool of war to use chemicals?
The chemical?
Yes.
We are against any WMD, any weapons of mass destruction, whether chemical or nuclear. And
so you're against the use of chemical warfare?
Yeah, it's not only me. As a state, as a government, in 2001, we proposed to the United Nations proposal to empty or to get rid of every WMD in the Middle East, and the United States stood against that proposal. So this is our conviction and policy.
But you're not a signatory to the chemical warfare
not yet
agreement.
Why
not?
Because Israel has WMD and it has to sign, and Israel occupying our land. So that's why we talked about Middle East, not Syria, not Israel. It should be comprehensive.
Do you consider chemical warfare equivalent to nuclear warfare?
I don't know, we haven't tried either.
Yeah, but you know, you're a head of state and you understand the consequences of
Do you mean
weapons that don't discriminate,
technically
that
they're
are
not
beyond.
Yeah, technically they're not the same, but
But-
morally it's the same.
Morally, they're the same.
They have the same, but at the end, killing is killing.
And it's
Mass killing
indiscriminate.
is mass killing.
Yes.
Sometimes you may kill tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands with very primitive armaments.
Then why do you have such a stockpile of chemical weapons?
We don't discuss this issue in public because we never said that we have it, and we never said that we don't have it. It's a Syrian issue, it's a military issue we never discussed in public with anyone.
This is from the New York Times this morning. Syria's leaders amassed one of the world's largest stockpiles of chemical weapons with help from the Soviet Union and Iran, as well as Western European suppliers, and even a handful of American companies, according to American diplomatic cables and declassified intelligence records. You have amassed one of the largest supplies of chemical weapons in the world.
To have or not to have is a possibility, but to depend on what the media say is nonsense. Or to depend on some of the reports of the intelligence is nonsense, and that has proven when they invaded Iraq 10 years ago, and they said Iraq has stockpile of WMD, and it was proven after the invasion that was false. It was fraud. So we cannot depend on what one magazine wrote. But at the end, I said it's something not to be discussed with anyone.
You accept that the world believes you do have a stockpile of chemical weapons.
Who?
The world.
We
the
didn't
United
discuss it.
States and other powers who also have chemical weapons.
It's not about what they believe in, it's about what the reality that we have. And this reality, we own it. We don't have to discuss it.
Speaking of reality, what was the reality on August 21st? What happened in your judgment?
We're not in the area where the alleged chemical attack was happened. As it alleged, we're not sure that anything had been caused.
Even at this date, you are not sure that chemical weapons, even though you have seen the videotape, even though you've seen the bodies, even though your own officials have been there.
I haven't finished. Our soldiers in another area were attacked chemically. Our soldiers. They went to the hospital as casualties because of chemical weapons. But in the area where they said the government used chemical weapons, we only had video and we only have pictures and allegations. We're not there. Our forces, our police, our institutions don't exist. How can you talk about what happened if you don't have evidences? We're not like the American administration. We're not social media administration or government. We are the government that deal with reality.
Well,
when we have evidences, we will announce.
Well, as you know, Secretary Kerry has said there is evidence that they saw rockets that fired from a region controlled by your forces into a region controlled by the rebels. They have evidence from satellite photographs of that. They have evidence of a message that was intercepted about chemical weapons, and that soon thereafter there were other intercepted messages. So Secretary Kerry has presented what he concludes is conclusive evidence.
No, he presented his confidence and he presented his convictions. It's not about confidence, it's about evidence. The Russians have completely opposite evidence that the missiles were thrown from area where the rebels control. That reminds me about what Kerry said, about the big lie that Colin Powell said in front of the world on satellites about the WMD in Iraq before going to war. When he said, this is our evidence, actually he gave false evidence. In this case, Kerry didn't even present any evidence. He talked we have evidence, and he didn't present anything. Not yet, nothing so far.
Well,
not single shred of evidence.
Do you have some remorse for those bodies, those people? It is said to be up to at least 1,000 or perhaps 1,400 who were in Eastern Ghouta who died.
We feel pain for every Syrian victim.
But what about victims of this assault from chemical warfare?
Dead is dead. Killing is killing. Crime is crime. When you feel pain about their family, about the loss that you have in your country. Whether one person killed, or 100, or 1,000. It's a loss. It's a crime. It's a moral issue. We have family that we sit with family that they lost their dear ones. It's not about how they killed. It's about they are dead now. This is the bad thing.
Has there been any remorse or sadness on behalf of the Syrian people for what happened?
I think sadness prevails in Syria now. We don't feel anything else but sadness, because we have this killing every day, whether chemical or whether with any kind. It's not about how. We feel with it every day.
But this was indiscriminate, and children were killed, and people who said goodbye to their children in the morning didn't see them and will never see them again.
You mean which
in Ghouta.
In Ghouta?
Yes.
That's the case every day in Syria. That's why we have to stop the killing. That's why we have to stop the killing. But what indiscriminate you're talking about? You said
the fact that chemical warfare is indiscriminate in who it kills.
You have evidence that there was
innocents as well as combatants.
Yeah, but you're not talking about evidence now. You're not talking about facts. We are talking about allegation. So we're not sure that if there's chemical weapon used and who used it. We cannot talk about virtual thing. We have to talk about facts.
It is said that your government delayed the United Nations observers from getting to Ghouta, and that you denied and delayed the Red Cross and the Red Crescent from getting there to make observations and to help.
The opposite happened. Your government delayed because we asked for delegation in March 2012 when the first attack happened in Aleppo in the north of Syria, and they delayed it till just a few days before Al-Ghouta when they sent those team. And the team itself said in his letter, in his report, that he did everything as he wanted. There was not a single obstacle.
But they have said they were delayed in getting there. They wanted to be there earlier.
No. There was a conflict. There was fighting. There were shooting. That's it. We didn't prevent them from going anywhere. We asked them to come. Why to delay them? Even if you want to take the American story, they say we used the chemical weapons the same day the team or the investigation team came to Syria. Is it logical? It's not logical. Even if a country or army wanted to use such weapons, he should have waited a few days till the investigation finished its work. It's not logical. The whole story doesn't even hold together.
We'll come back to it. If your government did not do it, despite the evidence, who did it against your country? Because they believe chemical weapons are so abhorrent that anybody who uses them crosses a red line, and that therefore, if they do that, they have to be taught a lesson so that they will not do it again.
What red line?
A red line of the use of chemical weapons against your own people.
Who drew it?
So the president says it was not just him, that the world has drawn it in their revulsion against the use of chemical weapons. That the world has drawn that red line.
It's not the world, because Obama drew that line, and Obama can draw a line for himself and for his country, not for other countries. We have our red lines, like our sovereignty and our independence. While if you want to talk the world red lines, United States used uranium-depleted uranium in Iraq. Israel used white phosphorus in Gaza, and nobody said anything. What about the red lines? We don't see red lines. It's political red lines.
The president is prepared to strike, and perhaps will get the authorization of Congress or not. The question then is, would you give up chemical weapons if it would prevent the president from authorizing a strike? If that is a deal you would accept.
Again, you always imply that we have chemical weapons.
I have to, because that's the assumption of the president.
Yeah.
That is his assumption, and he is the one who will order the strike.
It's his problem if he has an assumption. But for us in Syria, we have principles. We'll do anything to prevent the region from another crazy war. It's not only Syria, because it will start in Syria.
You'll do anything to prevent the region from having another crazy war.
Yes.
You recognize the consequences for you if there is a strike.
It's not about me. It's about the region.
Well, it's about your country. It's about your people.
Of course. My country and me, we are part of this region. We're not separated. You cannot discuss it as Syria or as me. It should be as part, as a whole, as comprehensive. That's how we have to look at it.
Some ask, why would you do it? It's a stupid thing to do if you're going to bring a strike down on your head by using chemical weapons. Others say you do it because, A, you're desperate, or in the alternative, you do it because you want other people to fear you. Yeah. Because these are such fearful weapons that if the world knows you have them, and specifically your opponents in Syria, the rebels, then you have gotten away with it and they will live in fear, and that therefore the president has to do something.
You cannot be desperate when the army is making advancement. That should have happened if we take into consideration that this presumption is correct and this is reality. You use it when you're in desperate situation. Our position is much better than before, so this is not correct.
Do you think you're winning the war?
I don't know what to winning is a subjective word, but we are making advancement. This is the correct word, because winning for some people is when you finish completely, when you win completely.
And the argument is made that if you're winning, it is because of the recent help you've gotten from Iran and from Hezbollah and additional supplies that have come to your side. People from outside of Syria supporting you in the effort against the rebels.
Iran doesn't have any soldier in Syria, so how could Iran help me?
Supplies, weaponry.
That's all before the crisis. We always have this kind of cooperation.
Hezbollah fighters have been here.
Hezbollah fighters on the
from
border
outside of the country.
Only on the border with Lebanon, where the terrorists attacked them. On the border with Lebanon, this is where Hezbollah retaliated, and this is where we have cooperation, and that's good.
Hezbollah forces are in Syria today?
On the border area with Lebanon, where they want to protect themselves and cooperate with us. But they don't exist all over Syria. They cannot exist all over Syria anyway, for many reasons. But they exist on the borders.
What advice are you getting from the Russians?
About
this war, about how to end this war?
Every friend of Syria is looking for peaceful solution, and we are convinced about that. We have this advice, and without this advice, we are convinced about it.
Do you have a plan to end the war?
Of course.
Which is?
At the very beginning, it was fully political. When you have these terrorists, the first part of the same plan, which is political, should start with stopping the smuggling of terrorists coming from abroad, stopping the logistic support, the money, all kind of support coming to these terrorists. This is the first part. Second, you can have national dialogue where different Syrian parties sit and discuss the future of Syria. Third, you will have the interim government or transitional government.
So you would meet with rebels?
Then you'll have the final elections, parliamentary elections, and you're going to have the presidential election.
But the question is, would you meet with rebels today to discuss a negotiated settlement?
In the initiative that we issued at the beginning of this year, we said every party with no exceptions.
So you
as long as they give up their armaments.
But you'll meet with the rebels and anybody who is fighting against you if they give up their weapons.
We don't have problem at all.
But then they will say, you're not giving up your weapons, why should we give up our weapons?
Does the government give up its weapon? Have you heard about that before?
No, but rebels don't normally give up their weapons either during the negotiation. They do that after a successful...
The armament of the government is legal armament. Any other armament is not legal. So how can you compare? It's completely different.
There is an intense discussion going on about all the things we're talking about in Washington, where if there's a strike, it will emanate from the United States' decision to do this. What do you want to say in this very important week in America and in Washington to the American people?
Supported by, or let's say led by, the United States, the West, the petrodollar countries, mainly Saudi Arabia, and before was Qatar, and Turkey. That's why it lasted 2 years and a half.
But what are they doing, those countries you cited?
Yeah, they have different agendas. For the West, they wanted to undermine the Syrian positions. For the petrodollar countries like Saudi Arabia, they think undermining Syria will undermine Iran on a sectarian basis. For Turkey, they think that if the Muslim Brotherhood take over the rest of the region, they will be very comfortable, they will be very happy, they will make sure that their political future is guaranteed. So they have different agendas and different goals.
But at the same time, as I said, you've used Hezbollah and you've gotten support. Or someone representing you had talked about some kind of deal in which you and your family would leave the country if you were guaranteed safe passage, if you were guaranteed there would be no criminal prosecution. You're aware of these reports?
Yeah. We have this guarantee from the first day of the crisis.
Because of the way you've acted?
No, because the agenda that I talked about, some of these agendas wanted me to quit. Very simply. So they said, we have all the guarantees if you want to leave, and all the money and everything you want. Of course, you just ignore that.
So you've been offered that opportunity?
Yeah, but it's not about me again. It's not my fight. It's not the fight of the government. It's the fight...
Started here.
Yeah, those people that started here, they support the government now against those rebels. That's what you don't know. You don't know as an American, you don't know as a reporter. That's why talking about what happened at the very beginning is completely different from what's happening now. It's not the same. There's very high dynamic things are changing on daily basis. So it's completely different image. Those people, though, who wanted revolution, they are cooperating with us.
I'm asking you again, is it in fact you being your father's son, and you believe that the only way to drive out people is to eliminate them the same way your father did?
In being independent, yes. In fighting terrorism, yes. In defending the Syrian people and the country, yes.
When I first interviewed you, there was talk of Bashar al-Assad. He's the hope. He's the reformer. That's not what they say anymore.
Who?
People who write about you, people who talk about you, people who analyze Syria and your regime.
Exactly. So the hope for American is different from the hope of Syrian. For me, I'm the hope. I should be the hope of the Syrian, not any other one. Not American, neither American, neither French, or anyone in the world. I'm president to help Syrian people. So this question should start from the hope of the Syrian people. And if there's any change regarding that hope, we should ask the Syrian people, not anyone else in the world.
But now they say, their words, a butcher. Comparisons to the worst dictators ever to walk on the face of the earth, comparing you to them. Using weapons that go beyond warfare. Bad about a dictator, they're now saying about you.
First of all, when you have a doctor who cut the leg to prevent the patient from the gangrene, if you have to, we don't call him butcher, we call him a doctor. And I thank you for saving the lives. When you have terrorism, you have war. When you have war, you always have innocent lives that could be the victim of any war. So you cannot talk about. We don't have to discuss what the image in the West before discussing the image within Syria. That's the question.
It's just not the West. I mean, it's the East and it's the Middle East, and I mean, the eyes of the world have been on Syria. We have seen atrocities on both sides, but on your side as well. They have seen brutality by a dictator that they say
so we have
put you in a category with the worst.
Yeah. So we have to allow the terrorists to come and kill the Syrians and destroy the country much, much more. This is where you can be a good president. That's what you imply.
But you can't allow the idea that there is opposition to your government from within Syria. That is not possible for you to imagine.
To imagine that we have opposition?
Yes.
We have it, and you can go and meet with them. We have some of them within the government, we have some of them outside the government. They are opposition. We have it.
But those are the people who have been fighting against you.
Opposition is different from terrorism. Opposition is a political movement. Opposition doesn't mean to take armament and kill people and destroy everything. Do you call the people in Los Angeles in the 90s, do you call them rebels or opposition? What would the British call the rebels less than 2 years ago in London? Did they call them opposition or rebels? Why should we call them opposition? They are rebels. They are not rebels even, they are terrorists. They are behaving as opposing country or government, by behaving, by barbecuing head, by eating the hearts of your victim. Is that opposition? What do you call the people who attacked the 2011th of September? Opposition? Even if they're not American, I know this. But some of them, they have, I think, nationality. I think one of them has American nationality. Do you call him opposition or terrorist? Why should you use a term in the United States and England and maybe other countries and use another term in Syria? This is double standard that we don't accept.
I once asked you what you feared the most, and you said the end of Syria as a secular state.
Yeah.
Is that end already here?
According to what we've been seeing recently in the area where the terrorists control, where they ban people from going to schools, ban young men from shaving their beards, and women have to wear to be covered from top to toes, from head to toes. And let's say, in brief, they leave the Taliban style in Afghanistan, completely the same style. With the time, yes, we can be worried, because the secular state should reflect secular society. And this secular society, with the time, if you don't get rid of those terrorists and this extremism and the Wahhabi style, of course it will influence at least the new and the coming generations. So and we don't say that we don't have it, we're still secular in Syria. But with the time, this secularism will be eroding.
Mr. President, thank you for allowing us to have a conversation.